My name is Diana. I'm 32 years old, and I run operations for a restaurant group that seats 3,000 people a week across 4 locations. I understand how a check moves from the kitchen to a table the way most people understand how to tie their shoes. It is not something I think about. It is simply something I know. So when my parents called after 3 years of total silence and invited me to dinner to begin healing, I should have asked one question before I said yes. Who is actually at that table? I didn't ask. I drove 40 minutes to the Belvedere, walked through the front doors, and found 16 members of my extended family already seated around a long table covered in lobster tails, wagyu steaks, and a $400 bottle of Bordeaux they had started pouring before I even pulled into the parking lot. My father looked up from the head of the table, smiled with the particular ease of a man who believes he has already won, and said the thing I had spent my whole adult life quietly dreading. "You're paying, right? You owe us that much." He thought he had cornered me. He hadn't counted on the 2 sentences I was about to whisper to our waiter, and he definitely hadn't counted on what his own credit card was about to announce to the entire family 15 minutes later. But let me back up a few weeks before the dinner, before the parking lot full of cars I recognized, before my father tried to hand me a bill the size of a mortgage payment. I need to tell you who I was on the morning the invitation arrived, because that's the version of me they were counting on, and the version I had already stopped being. I manage for restaurants. Not own. Manage. I built my way up from bussing tables at a steakhouse in Knoxville when I was 17, still smelling like fryer oil on the school bus the next morning. Hostess at 19. Server at 21. Floor manager by 24. Regional operations director by 30. I am not wealthy. I have a 2-bedroom condo that's paid off, a retirement account I never touch, and exactly one indulgence. Sparkling water. Still or sparkling. That's what I order when I eat out. Every single time. My staff thinks it's a quirk. It isn't. When you spend your formative years paying for everyone else's steak, you learn to keep your own tab small enough to walk away from. That morning I was in my office reviewing a vendor contract for imported olive oil. The kind of Tuesday that makes you forget not everyone's life runs on spreadsheets and purchase orders. My phone buzzed. I glanced down and felt something cold settle behind my ribs. 3 years of silence. And there it was. A notification from the group chat. I had been removed from a day. I became the family's designated villain. Family has added you back. I stared at that notification for a full minute before I opened it. The chat history was clean, nothing above my mother's newest message, which meant they had either cleared the thread, or more likely, they had been running a second group without me the entire time. Mom's message was warm, careful, almost rehearsed. She wrote that she and Dad had been doing a great deal of reflection and wanted to invite me to dinner at the Belvedere to begin the healing process as a family. Just the 4 of us, she specified. Her, Dad, me, and my sister Brooke. A small dinner. A fresh beginning. Then a second message arrived 30 seconds later, containing the sentence that should have told me everything I needed to know. Family takes care of family, sweetheart. It's time we remembered that. Family takes care of family. She used to say that when I was 19 and she needed my server tips to cover the electric bill. She said it when I was 23 and Dad needed a cosigner on the truck. She said it when Brooke's first apartment fell through and I quietly paid the security deposit without telling anyone. In my family, that phrase had always carried one meaning. Diana takes care of family. I noticed my mother hadn't said sorry. She hadn't said we were wrong. She had said it was time to heal. Passive voice. No subject. No one responsible. I typed back, "I'll be there." Then I set my phone face down on the desk and went back to the olive oil contract, pretending my hands weren't shaking. 3 years earlier, my sister Brooke decided to open a cafe. Not after writing a business plan. Not after conducting a market study. A cafe, because she had visited one in Charleston with exposed brick and a matcha menu and decided she could replicate it. She was 26 years old, had never managed so much as a lemonade stand, and needed a $75,000 small business loan. The bank said yes with a cosigner. That cosigner was supposed to be me. My mother called on a Sunday. My father sat beside her, arms already folded, already annoyed before I had said a single word. Brooke needed the loan. The cafe was her dream. I had good credit, a stable income, a long history of saying yes when pressed. Just sign the papers, Diana. I asked to see the business plan first. Brooke didn't have one. I asked about projected margins, lease terms, supplier contracts. Brooke looked at me the way you look at someone who has just suggested your child is ugly. My mother's voice went flat. She's your sister. You don't need a spreadsheet to love your sister. I said no. Not because I didn't love Brooke. I did. But I had spent enough years in this industry watching people pour everything they had into concepts that had no structural foundation. I knew what $75,000 of someone else's debt looks like at 3 in the morning when the cafe is dark and the loan payment is still due. My father stood up. He pointed at the door and said the sentence that closed it for 3 years. If you won't help this family, you're not part of it. I drove home. The next morning, I had been removed from family. No call, no text. For 3 years, I was the daughter who loved money more than her own sister. Here's the part one find hardest to admit. The silence almost broke me. Not because they were right. I knew they weren't. It almost broke me because I missed being needed. That was the actual wound. And it took me 2 years and a therapist named Dr. Kwan to name it correctly. I had been a family fixer since I was 17. My first paycheck went to groceries. My tax refund went to my mother's dental work. When my father's truck transmission blew, I paid for the full rebuild and told him it had been covered under warranty, because I knew he would never accept a gift from his 22-year-old daughter. When Brooke got married, I covered the florist, the photographer, and half the reception, and sat quietly while my mother gave a toast about raising 2 strong girls. 2 strong girls. 1 bill. I didn't do it out of pure generosity. I did it because somewhere around age 15, I had learned that the fastest way to keep the peace in my family was to make sure nobody ever had to ask twice. Ask once, Diana pays, everyone's happy, dinner is quiet. I had trained them. I had built them a vending machine and taught them my wallet was inside it. Insert guilt. Receive payment. And when the machine finally set out of order, they didn't troubleshoot it. They unplugged it and walked away for 3 years. So when my mother's message appeared, family takes care of family, sweetheart, I felt the old reflex fire in my chest like a muscle I hadn't stretched in years. Go fix it. Pay whatever it costs. Make it quiet again. But I also heard Dr. Kwan's voice, steady as a metronome. You taught them you would always pay. That was your mistake to correct. Not by paying more, but by stopping. My coworker Jess told me not to go. She sat across from me at lunch the day after the invitation arrived and said, Diana, this has ambush written all over it. My sous chef Marco said the same thing. But I had already decided, not because I expected an apology, but because I wanted to sit across from my parents and find out whether 3 years had changed anything, or whether the silence had just been a longer version of the same conversation we had always had. The one where I was expected to listen, agree, and pay. I wanted closure. Even if closure meant confirming the door was sealed shut. There was something else, too. I'm going to be honest about it, because I think some of you will understand. I miss my mother. Not the version who orchestrated. Not the one who kept score. The one who taught me to make cornbread in a cast-iron skillet when I was 9 and sang along with Dolly Parton while the butter melted. That mother hadn't called in 3 years either. But some evenings I still heard the Dolly Parton. So I told Jess I was going. I told Marco I would be fine. I told myself the same thing and almost believed it. I set one rule. 1 dinner, civil, no money. And if something felt wrong, I would leave before dessert. I wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it to my steering wheel. That note was still there when I pulled into the Belvedere's parking lot and started counting cars. I dressed simply on purpose. Black trousers, a gray blouse I wear to vendor meetings, flat shoes, no jewelry except the small silver watch I bought myself the year I made regional director. Not to impress anyone, but because I had earned it and it kept good time, and that felt like enough. The drive took 40 minutes. I played no music. My hand stayed at 10 and 2. Somewhere near the highway merge, my stomach tightened in a way I recognized. The same feeling I get when a walk-in cooler fails on a Friday evening, and I know the next 6 hours are going to be painful. Pure instinct. My body knew something my brain was still negotiating with. I almost turned back at the exit ramp, but I thought about that cornbread, and I thought about Dr. Kwan's voice, and I kept driving. The Belvedere sat at the end of a landscaped strip of shops, the expensive side of town, the kind of place where the parking lot has shrubbery and the hostesses wear all black. My father's truck was in the 3rd row, my mother's sedan beside it. Fine. Then I saw my Aunt Linda's white Buick, my Uncle Greg's SUV, my sister Brooke's hatchback, still carrying the bumper sticker from the cafe that had closed 11 months after opening. 3 more vehicles I recognized. 2 I didn't. My stomach dropped before I even opened my car door. Just the four of us, Mom had written. I counted 9 vehicles. I sat in my car for 2 full minutes with the engine off and my hands on the steering wheel, reading the sticky note. One dinner, then home. The sensible choice would have been to reverse out of the lot and drive 40 minutes back to my condo and eat leftover soup and never think about the family gathering I hadn't been told about. But I got out. I straightened my blouse. I locked the car and walked toward the entrance because I was 32 years old, and I had spent 3 years learning how not to run, and I was not about to start running again in a restaurant parking lot on a Thursday evening. The front doors were heavy glass with brass handles, the kind that whisper entrees start at $42 before you see a menu. Inside, the lobby smelled like rosemary, warm bread, and money. The hostess checked her screen. Mayfield. I nodded. Your party's already seated. She said it the way hostesses say things when they have been managing a large group for an hour and are working very hard not to appear stressed. I recognized the expression. I had worn it myself 1,000 times. She led me toward the back of the dining room. I could hear them before I could see them. My Aunt Linda's unmistakable laugh cutting through the low murmur of every other table. One dinner, then home. I turned the corner and saw the table. 16 chairs. Every one of them filled except the seat at the far end, directly across from my father. White linen, heavy silverware, candles in low crystal holders, and platters I could identify from 10 feet away. Lobster tails arranged across crushed ice, wagyu sliders on a tiered stand, a charcuterie board the size of a coffee table. At the center, a bottle of wine I recognized from vendor tastings, a 2016 vintage, retail approximately $400. Already half empty. They had been here a while. They had been ordering freely. The hostess paused at the edge of the private alcove and glanced at me with a look that translates perfectly across every restaurant I have ever worked in. Good luck. Then she leaned closer and said quietly, Your father placed a card down to hold the reservation. Just so you know, we require 1 for parties over 12. I filed that detail the way I file every operational piece of information. Silently, completely, permanently. His card is on file. He had secured the table, and yet I already understood with perfect clarity that the bill was not supposed to land on him. My mother saw me first. She rose with both arms open, and every head at the table rotated toward me. Diana. Oh, sweetheart. Look at you. Applause. Actual applause. As if I were a returning hero rather than the daughter they had ignored for 1,000 consecutive days. My Uncle Greg whistled. My Aunt Linda pressed a cloth napkin to her eyes. Brooke raised her wine glass and offered the kind of smile that shows teeth, but carries no warmth. 16 people, lobster and wagyu, and a $400 bottle of wine. Just the four of us, Mom had written. I sat down. What else do you do when 16 faces are watching you, and a waiter has already poured water into your glass before your bag hits the floor? I sat down, and I smiled. Because 15 years of front-of-house work gives you the ability to smile while your brain is running a full threat assessment. My mother settled back, beaming. We wanted it to be a surprise, the whole family together, just like the old days. I thought it was just the four of us, I said. She waved her hand as though swatting something small. Well, once Linda heard, and then Greg, you know how family is. I knew exactly how family was. I scanned the table. My father sat at the head, carving a wagyu slider with the deliberate satisfaction of a man who believes he has designed an airtight situation. Brooke sat to his left, phone in one hand, wine in the other. Aunt Linda and Uncle Greg anchored the middle. Cousins I hadn't spoken to since a Thanksgiving 5 years prior filled the remaining seats, along with 2 spouses I had met once and Aunt Linda's neighbor, who I had never seen before in my life, and who was apparently eating lobster at whatever this occasion was supposed to be. My mother reached across and squeezed my hand. See? Family takes care of family. There was again. The same 5 words. The same warm packaging aimed at the same target. I squeezed back and said nothing. I was already counting plates. My father is the kind of man who orders for a table, doesn't ask orders. He waved the waiter over, a young server barely out of his teens who moved with the careful urgency of someone running a table far too large and far too demanding for one person alone. Without glancing at a menu, my father rattled off. Another round of the lobster tails, 2 more wagyu plates, and bring another bottle of that Bordeaux. The good one. loud enough for the tables on either side of us to hear. He drew his credit card from his wallet and held it between two fingers the way a magician presents a coin before the trick. "Put it all on this," he told the waiter. "We're celebrating tonight." The waiter, his name tag read Nathan, scribbled, nodded, and disappeared toward the kitchen. I watched my father tuck the card back into his wallet with a small, satisfied pat. Something was wrong. I had grown up watching this man dispute the price of a replacement muffler. I had seen him return a shirt because a sale tag had gone missing. Raymond Mayfield did not wave $400 bottles of wine like flags. He did not gesture with credit cards as though money were decorative. This was a performance, and it was aimed directly at me. "Look how well we're doing, Diana. Look how little we needed you." Except the truck in the parking lot was the same one from 5 years ago, with a dent in the rear quarter panel he had never gotten fixed. And my mother's handbag, the Coach purse she had carried since I was in high school, sat on the chair beside her with a cracked strap held together by a safety pin. They were performing. I just didn't yet know the price of admission. The quiet cuts started around the second bottle. Aunt Linda leaned across my uncle and said, "Must be nice running all those fancy restaurants while the rest of us clip coupons." She laughed when she said it. The way people laugh when they want you to understand they are completely serious. Cousin Megan asked if I ever felt guilty living so well while my parents were going through a rough patch. I hadn't been told about any rough patch. Nobody had mentioned one. Brooke, without looking up from her phone, added, "She wouldn't know. She hasn't been around." Each comment landed with the precision of something rehearsed, not scripted word for word, but coordinated the way a choir finds the same note without a conductor. They had been talking about me before I arrived, about my absence, my income, my life. They had come to the table tonight with a shared and settled story. Diana left. Diana has plenty. Diana owes. Aunt Linda delivered the thesis statement. She reached across the table and took my hand with the gravity of someone offering condolences. "Family doesn't keep score, dear." I almost laughed. This from a woman who had once stopped speaking to her daughter-in-law for 6 months over a Thanksgiving seating arrangement. I pulled my hand back gently and picked at my glass. Sparkling water. The only thing in front of me. The only thing I had ordered. The contrast was almost comedic. 16 people swimming in lobster and Bordeaux, and me with a glass of San Pellegrino at the end of the table like a designated driver at a celebration that was, in every practical sense, mine to fund. Nathan passed behind my chair and caught my eye. "Just the water tonight." "Just the water," I said. He nodded like he understood something I hadn't said aloud. Let me tell you about Nathan. He was maybe 19 or 20, slight the way restaurant workers are before they learn to eat between rushes. He moved fast, but carefully, the way new servers do when the table is too large and the order too complicated, and they understand that one wrong plate means a manager conversation they cannot afford. I recognized everything about him, because I had been him, 17 years old, 2 tables deep, learning that the guests who snapped their fingers always tip the least. He was working our entire 16 top nearly alone, running every order, every refill, every request from Aunt Linda for more bread, which she had made 3 times in 20 minutes. He never sighed. He never complained. He refilled my sparkling water without being asked. And when he set the glass back down, he caught me watching the table with an expression I probably should have better concealed. "Long night," he said quietly. I almost told him the whole truth. Instead, I said, "You're doing great." He blinked, genuinely startled, as though he had momentarily forgotten that a customer might say that. Then he straightened himself just slightly, maybe half an inch taller, and moved on to Uncle Greg's refill. I watched him go and thought about the 17-year-old version of me who used to balance 4 plates on her forearm and cry in a walk-in freezer on the hard nights. That girl had no idea she would end up on the other side of the table like this one, sitting across from the family that had shaped her into the fixer and funder she had become, being asked without being asked to write one more check. But she would understand exactly what I was about to do. She would understand it completely. I excused myself around the 40-minute mark. I needed 2 minutes alone and a door I could lock. The Belvedere's restroom was the kind with cloth hand towels, lavender soap, and a full-length mirror that made you look slightly better than you felt, which was a neat trick because I felt as though I were digesting broken glass. I turned on the faucet and pressed cold water against my wrist the way you do when you need your heart rate to cooperate with your brain. Then I saw it, a phone on the edge of the marble countertop, screen still illuminated. a case covered in daisy stickers. Brooke's phone. She must have come in before me and set it down without thinking. Brooke left things everywhere. It was one of the few traits we had always shared. I didn't plan to look. I want to be entirely clear about that. But the screen was lit, and the notification banner at the top was from a group chat I had never been added to. The preview text was enough to stop my hand mid-reach. The group was named Dinner Plan. 3 members: Mom, Dad, Brooke. The most recent message, sent 4 days earlier, was from my mother. The preview showed the words I can still recite from memory. Don't tell Diana, it's everyone. Once she's there with the whole family watching, she won't dare. The message cut off at the banner's edge. My pulse was steady. My hands were dry. I picked up the phone the way I pick up a vendor invoice that doesn't add up. Not with anger, not with surprise, only with the quiet intention of confirming what the numbers are already suggesting. I scrolled up. The complete message read, "Don't tell Diana, it's everyone. Once she's there with the whole family watching, she won't dare say no. She never could handle a scene." Below it, my father had replied, "Just make sure she sits at my end. I'll handle the ask." Brooke's contribution, timestamped 2 minutes later. Order the good stuff before she gets there. Once it's on the table, she can't exactly send it back. LOL. I kept scrolling. 3 weeks of messages. My mother coordinating the guest list. My father handling the reservation logistics and the framing of the invitation so it sounded casual and private. Then the messages that made the room feel smaller. My mother, 10 days prior. The bank called again Thursday. We need to sort something out before June. My father, Diana can cover us through spring. She's got more than enough. And then the one that landed like something heavy dropped from a height. My mother, 8 days earlier. It's not asking for money. It's letting her back into the family. She should be grateful we're even giving her this chance. Grateful. They wanted me to be grateful for the privilege of being maneuvered into a 16-person dinner at a restaurant I would never have chosen for myself, so that I could pay a bill I hadn't ordered to solve a financial problem nobody had told me about, for a family that had cut me out for 3 years when I'd said no the last time. I set Brooke's phone back on the counter, screen down, exactly where I'd found it. I washed my hands. I looked at myself in that flattering mirror. I know what you're doing, I thought. I know what this costs. And for the first time in 15 years, I am not going to pay it. The strangest part was how calm I felt. Not numb, not furious, just clear, the way a kitchen goes perfectly quiet right before a dinner rush begins. Everything in position, nothing wasted, every station ready. If you have ever discovered that the people who claim to love you only valued what you could provide, you know exactly how cold that tile floor felt beneath my shoes. I walked back to the table wearing the same expression I use when a health inspector arrives unannounced. Pleasant, unreadable, fully operational. Nobody noticed anything different. But I noticed things now that I hadn't allowed myself to see before. My mother kept glancing at my father's wallet on the table. Quick, small flicks of her eyes like someone checking a countdown clock. My father's laughter was precisely half a beat too loud. The way people laugh when they are nervous and using volume as camouflage. The second wine bottle was nearly empty, and nobody had suggested slowing down. Because why would they? They weren't paying. That was the entire architecture of the evening. And every lobster tail, every wagyu slider, every glass of that $400 Bordeaux was another brick in a wall they were building around me. High enough that I could not climb out without creating the kind of scene I had spent my entire adult life maneuvering to avoid. The dessert menus arrived. Aunt Linda ordered creme brulee without checking the price. Brooke requested the chocolate souffle, which the server noted required a 20-minute lead time, which meant she had ordered it before I sat down. Of course she had. Brooke was the one who finally cracked the surface. She had consumed 3 glasses of Bordeaux by that point. Enough to sand away whatever filter she normally kept between her thoughts and her mouth, which had never been especially substantial to begin with. She leaned across the table with her glass, tilted toward me, and grinned. "Relax, big sister. It's just dinner. You can afford it." I set my water glass down. "Afford what?" "This." She gestured at the full expanse of the table. The platters, the wine, the 16-place settings, the creme brulee, and the souffle currently being prepared by a kitchen that had no idea it was catering to a setup. "We order the good stuff, since you're treating." She said it with the ease of something that had been settled at a meeting I hadn't been invited to attend, which, of course, it had been. The table went quiet for 3 full seconds. My mother shot Brooke a look that said too soon, and Brooke shrugged the way people shrug when they have knocked over a vase they have no intention of cleaning up. Uncle Greg studied his lobster. Aunt Linda found her napkin suddenly fascinating. My father cleared his throat. I looked at Nathan, who had just arrived with a fresh bottle of sparkling water, and I realized 2 things simultaneously. First, Nathan was the only person at this table who had poured me something without expecting anything in return. Second, Brooke had just announced out loud what every single person in that room already knew. I was the target. This whole evening was a coordinated effort, and every lobster tail was evidence. Dad waited until dessert had arrived. He was calculated about the timing. I will give him that. The soufflé was on the table, the creme brulee was cracked, the second Bordeaux was upside down in the ice bucket, and the table was warm and slow with sugar and contentment. The particular satisfaction that settles over a meal you did not pay for and do not intend to. My father set down his fork. He folded his hands on the edge of the table, a gesture I had cataloged across a lifetime. The posture he used before signing documents, before delivering speeches, before telling me at 23 that he needed a co-signer. Just this once, he looked at me across the wreckage of a meal I had never ordered, surrounded by an audience I had never been told about. He smiled, not unkindly, with the specific expression of a man who believes he is being entirely reasonable. "You're paying, right? You owe us that much." 5 words. 16 people heard them. Nathan, standing at the service station behind me, heard them. The couple at the adjacent table, pretending not to listen, heard them. My mother gave a small nod. My sister smirked. My aunt reached for another pat of butter as though the matter had been formally resolved. Not one person at that table had said they were sorry. Not one had said we were wrong. Not one had mentioned missing me for any reason that had nothing to do with my credit limit. "You owe us that much." I looked at my father's folded hands. I looked at my mother's carefully maintained warmth. I looked at Brooke, already returning to her phone because as far as she was concerned, this was already decided. I looked at my sparkling water, half full, catching the candlelight. I placed my napkin on the table. I smiled. "Let me go take care of things," I said and stood up. My mother exhaled. Aunt Linda pressed a hand to her chest. My father unfolded his hands. Every single one of them believed I was going to pay. Here is the thing 15 years behind a host stand teaches you. The person who controls the check controls the room. My family believed they controlled it. They had chosen the restaurant, assembled the audience, curated the menu, and delivered the demand with precision. They had 16 witnesses, 2 bottles of wine, and 3 years of accumulated pressure on their side. I had 2 sentences and a waiter named Nathan. I did not walk toward the front register. I walked to the service station at the back of the dining room, where Nathan was organizing check presenters and a floor manager named David was reviewing a ticket. David wore the standard uniform, black shirt, black tie, earpiece, and he carried the composed readiness of a man who has worked in this industry long enough to handle whatever approaches him. I kept my voice low, not dramatic, not conspiratorial, simply the volume you use in this business when you're handling something that does not require the dining room's attention. "I'm not the host, and I won't be covering this table tonight. Please bring the full check to the gentleman at the head of the table, the one whose card is already on file for the reservation." David blinked once. He glanced at Nathan, then back at me. "And one more thing, separate out just my sparkling water onto its own check and add 30% to mine for your team. You have genuinely earned it tonight." Nathan's eyes widened slightly. David looked at me for 3 full seconds, reading the situation the way a strong floor manager reads every situation. Quickly, thoroughly, without editorial comment. Then he nodded. "Done." That was it. No argument. "No, are you certain, ma'am?" Because David had been doing this long enough to recognize a redirect, and Nathan had been watching that table long enough to understand why one was necessary. I paid my check on the spot. 1 sparkling water, 2 refills, plus 30%. The largest tip Nathan had likely seen in a month. David ran my card, handed me the receipt, and said quietly, "I'll present the table's check in approximately 10 minutes, once the dessert course clears." Perfect. I walked back to the table, sat down, and took a slow sip of my water. Brooke was debating something with Cousin Tyler. Aunt Linda was relaying a neighbor's fence dispute to Uncle Greg. My mother was watching me with the careful attention of someone who believes the bill situation has been quietly resolved. My father was leaning back, arms folded, content. 16 people finishing dessert, draining the last of a $400 bottle of wine, waiting for a bill they had no intention of seeing. I set my glass down and waited with them. Those 10 minutes were the most peaceful of my entire evening. Nathan appeared at the edge of the alcove, and I knew before he took his first step whose chair he was walking toward. He placed the check presenter, leather-bound, embossed with the Belvedere's logo, directly in front of my father, not in the center of the table, not near me, directly in front of Raymond Mayfield, the man who had made the reservation, whose card was on file, who had told the table to put it all on this 2 hours ago. The conversation at the table died like a candle in a sudden draft. My father stared at the leather folder for 2 full seconds. I could see him processing. The check was supposed to go to Diana. The check is in front of me. My mother's eyes went wide. She looked at me, then at the folder, then back at me, and for the first time all evening her composure fractured enough to reveal the arithmetic running behind it. My father recovered. He was practiced at recovering, 63 years of never admitting he had been caught off guard. He picked up the check presenter with a casual flick, opened it, and did not look at the total. He couldn't look at the total. If he examined that number in front of 16 people, the performance would be over. "I've got it," he said, withdrawing his credit card with the same 2-finger flourish from earlier. He handed it to Nathan without breaking eye contact with me. "We're celebrating, remember?" Nathan took the card. "I'll be right back, sir." He said it gently. The way you say something when you already know what is about to happen and the person you're speaking to does not. My father leaned back, crossed his arms, smiled at me with the full confidence of a man who believed his credit card was about to save him. Nathan returned in 4 minutes. He stood beside my father's chair. He leaned down, his voice calibrated to be discreet, but the table had gone so quiet that the words carried clearly. "I'm sorry, sir. The card has been declined." Nobody moved. My father's smile held for 1 more second, a reflex like a light that stays illuminated for a moment after you cut the power. Then it went out. "Run it again," he said. Nathan nodded and disappeared. He returned 2 minutes later. Same posture, same careful voice. "I'm sorry, sir. It's still not going through. Would you like to try another card?" My father reached into his wallet. His fingers moved through the card slots. 1 card, then another. Then a third he pulled from behind his driver's license like a final option he had almost forgotten he had. He handed it to Nathan without a word. The table was silent. 16 people. Not a single fork moving. No wine being poured. No laughter. Only the sound of Raymond Mayfield's 63 years of carefully maintained pride being compressed into a wallet he could not close fast enough. Nathan came back a 3rd time. He didn't need to speak. His expression said everything. My father looked at him. Then he looked at me. Not with anger. Not yet. With the raw, unguarded expression of a man who has realized, in front of everyone who matters to him, that the safety net he had been counting on is gone, and the ground beneath him is exactly as unforgiving as he had always feared. He looked at me the way you look at a life raft that is pulling away from a sinking ship. I picked up my sparkling water, took 1 quiet sip, set it down. "I don't owe you." I never did. My father's chair scraped back against the hardwood floor with a sound like something tearing. "Diana." His voice was controlled, low, trembling at the edges. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything, Dad. Your card was declined. That's between you and your bank. You were supposed to—" He stopped himself, but not quickly enough. The unfinished sentence hung in the air above the table, visible to every person in that room. "You were supposed to pay." My mother began crying. Not quietly, with the particular volume and rhythm of tears that are designed to draw sympathy from the surrounding tables. Aunt Linda reached for my arm. My father's expression shifted from stunned to wounded. "After everything we've done for you." "What did you do for me, Mom?" My voice remained level. I did not lean forward. I did not raise it. Tell me, in front of everyone, what exactly did you do for me in the last 3 years? Brooke slammed her hand on the table. This is so typical. You always have to make everything about you. I looked at her. Then I looked at the table itself. The empty platters, the inverted wine bottles, the soufflé remnants, and creme brulee dishes that 16 people had consumed without a single glance at the right-hand column of the menu. And one more thing, I said. I read the messages on Brooke's phone in the restroom. The table went completely white. Brooke's face drained. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's gaze dropped to the tablecloth. She can cover us through spring. She's got more than enough. I let that land. If you need genuine help, real help, I will sit with you and a financial counselor and we will work through this together. No tricks, no audience, no lobster. But I'm not paying this bill. I didn't order it. I wasn't told about it. And I don't owe it to you. I stood. You always told me family takes care of family. So why was I the only one who ever did? Then my father did something I had not anticipated. His voice dropped. And for one brief, honest moment, it sounded like the voice of a man standing in a house with all the lights turned off. Diana, please. We're drowning. I saw him. The frightened man behind the performance. The father who had lost his business and his confidence and could not say it plainly until his credit card announced it for him. I saw him, and I felt it, the old pull, the ache, the reflex that had governed 15 years of my life. Then he added, and you'd let us. And the ache stopped, because even while drowning, he was still reaching for my wallet instead of my hand. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said. I genuinely mean that. But this isn't asking for help. This is a trap. You didn't invite me here to make amends. You invited me here to make a payment. Nobody spoke. I picked up my bag. I walked past the boozer, past the hostess stand, past the heavy glass doors with the brass handles. Nathan caught me near the coat check. Ma'am. He was holding my receipt. Thank you, he said. Quiet. Sincere. I touched his shoulder briefly. You're doing great, I told him again. Then I walked out. The lot was quiet. A warm Thursday evening. The kind that smells of cut grass and restaurant exhaust and the beginning of summer. Cicadas starting up in the landscaping trees. I sat in my car with the engine off and the window down. I read the sticky note on my steering wheel. One dinner, then home. I opened the family group chat. Messages were already cascading in. My mother, Aunt Linda, Brooke, cousins I hadn't heard from in years. A waterfall of exclamation points and accusations. The particular fury that only ignites in people who have been caught doing something they cannot admit to. I did not read them. I scrolled to the bottom, tapped Leave Group, and watched the confirmation appear. Diana has left the chat. I set the phone on the passenger seat. I started the engine. I drove home in the same silence I had driven there. Except this time, the silence wasn't anxious. It wasn't bracing for something. It was mine. The fallout was quieter than I had expected. No one called that night, or the next day, or the day after that. A week later, cousin Megan reached out separately. Not through the group chat directly. I just wanted you to know, she wrote. That was the most honest thing anyone has done at a family dinner in 20 years. I'm sorry I was part of it. Megan was the only one who apologized. 3 weeks after the dinner, Brooke texted me. Not to apologize, to ask if I could lend her first and last month's rent for a new apartment. I sent her the name of a nonprofit financial counseling service and wished her well. She didn't respond. Through Megan, over the following months, I learned the rest in fragments. My father's contracting business had collapsed 18 months before the dinner. 2 commercial projects that had gone badly sideways. My mother had been paying minimums on 4 credit cards using a home equity line that was now maxed. The house went on the market in July. They relocated to a smaller rental 30 minutes south. Brooke took a position at a dental office answering phones. None of it was what I had wanted for them. All of it was the consequence of decisions made long before I walked through the Belvedere's front doors. And none of it was mine to repair. I followed through on what I had said at the table. 6 weeks later, I called my father and offered to sit with him and a financial counselor. No conditions, no audience, no expectations. He hung up. I haven't called again, but the offer still stands. I learned something that evening that I want to say plainly for anyone who recognizes this story from the inside. The most expensive thing you can purchase is other people's comfort with your silence. For 15 years, I had been paying that price in dollars, in time, in the quiet erosion of my own self-worth, because the alternative was a room exactly like the one I had just left, full of watching faces and unspoken expectations, and the understanding that my value to this family was denominated in what I could cover. The night I stopped paying for their comfort was the night I finally stopped being in debt to people who had never once acknowledged the balance. That is my story. 16 seats, one glass of sparkling water, a credit card that told the truth that no one at that table was willing to say out loud. If you have ever been the family bank, hear this clearly. Helping is a choice. It is not a debt you were born carrying. A boundary doesn't have to be loud to be unbreakable. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a room full of people who expect you to fold is simply to sit there, drink your water, and wait for the check to land where it was always supposed to.